The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. I'm in your house.
Again, I think we might be making that into like a recurring thing.
Yeah. So is
think-
this.
Ow. Damn it. So this is the first time that we have set up at a smaller table.
Yes.
It'll be the last time.
See, we're learning stuff.
So why are you here in my house?
I'm here to visit my in-laws and be a dutiful husband.
Don't lie about any of that.
I'm here to play Streets of Rage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah, Electric Boogaloo.
Yes. That's actually not that. Wasn't there a lot of street fighting in
Breaking Boogie 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
I'm a little bummed that I knew the name of that title like that fast.
Whoops. Just revealed something about myself I did not mean to.
I mean, the movie that I watched like years ago. I don't know, probably.
Yeah. I'm going to say yes, definitely. I'm definitely... No, Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights.
Yes.
Boogie Nights had a lot of, like, violence.
Yeah.
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 Oof. Okay, anyway. So, Streets of Rage 2 is the game we played. And I don't think we've done a great job of reserving obvious two-player games for when we could actually play together. We got like a C+ average. Doing okay.
Yeah.
So we got to play this one in, solo and as a couple, like a romantic couple.
It's a duet. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Like a tango.
Yeah. A beautiful pas de deux.
Yes. I called the beautiful part. This game came out in 92. There's a month and a day in there somewhere, I'm sure, but somehow only the year was at hand. So 92. What's your experience with this game?
This is one that I think one of my friends owned, but that definitely I played a little bit of. I think that this was one that one of my friends owned, and that whenever he'd say, hey, honestly, like, do you want to play Streets of Rage or Streets of Rage 2? I would say, why don't we just play Turtles in Time?
Oh,
And
oh.
and again, it wasn't because Turtles in Time was an inherently better game. It was because it was just because I love Ninja Turtles. You didn't love Ninja Turtles, so it's like, which would you rather play, a 2D, a side-scrolling beat 'em up, or the exact same game but you're the Ninja Turtles? It's like, well, that one. So
Ninja Turtles, please. I feel like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had a similar thing where if you liked the characters in Street Fighter, right? Like if you wanted to be Ken or Ryu, like that was the fighting game you wanted to play, right? Even though if you know anything about fighting games, they handle completely differently. They're totally different games, but like they got kind of like a brand loyalty, and beat 'em ups are generic, right? It's like beat 'em ups. I feel like every time there's a parody video game, there's like a better than 50-50 that it's a beat 'em up. Like there's a Jay and Silent Bob video game, and it's a beat 'em up, right? It's just how they do things.
Yep.
So this feels like that. It's like, oh, do you want to play any beat 'em up, or do you want to play Turtles in Time? And it's like, well, yeah,
Turtles in Time.
Yeah. I also generally gravitated towards Turtles in Time, but my neighbor friend, like that one friend that we were close enough in age to play video games together, and he lived basically right across the street. So it was like, oh, I can go play a 2-player game with him at pretty much any moment. And it was like Mutant League Hockey was another one we played. We've had that in our backlog for ages.
Mutant League Hockey.
Right. But that's a game, like, you don't play that game alone.
Didn't we get into argument as to whether that was a TV show as well?
And I believe it also was.
Yes, it was both. And that's what it was that the IMDb didn't have a conclusion date on it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and we were freaking out. Like,
like, is it still on? So sorry, that just all came screaming back to me. Go on.
Yeah. Well, it's a scary thought that maybe out there they're on like season 42 of Mutant League Hockey. Yeah. So that was a friend that him and I, like, all of our video gaming was this kind of game. He didn't play RPGs. He didn't really like city builders or some of the other like SimCity kind of games that I played. But we played sports games, right? NBA Jam, I played over at his house. Streets of Rage, I played over at his house. Like, that was just what we did. So playing this game single player for this review, it's not the only time I've ever played it single player, but it's one of the very few. So that was kind of like, I've been playing this game for 20 years and I've like sort of never played this game alone. I've always had a shepherd.
Well, I would definitely argue that generally brawlers, beat 'em ups, things like that are meant to be played at least 2-player, if not 4-player, because that's kind of the whole point, is...
Ooh, quick philosophical question. So there's like Mario Party, Rock Band, like the kind of games that are, no, really, play these with other people. They're essentially digital board games.
Community is one of the core aesthetics.
Yes. Brawlers kind of started that. When you think about like people in an arcade, like if I'm playing Centipede or whatever, you may be standing there like cheering me on or waiting, I got next. But if we are at a cabinet together, we're probably playing a brawler, right? If we're fighting, we're playing like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. But if we're doing something collaboratively in an arcade, it's probably this.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think that would be statistically accurate.
Yeah, it wasn't really until later that they had like the, your like time splitters, right? Your side by side with zombies and
shooters.
Yeah,
it's also a good game. But anyway,
that'd be another interesting but hard one to do.
Yeah,
you gotta go to a barcade.
We tried that one time, but we couldn't find the cabinet.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, well, no, because I do remember though that when we were trying to find the cabinet, we couldn't find that one, but we did find a different one where we put a life into 4 different guns.
Was that Jurassic Park?
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, and I remember like we had to cock the shotguns by like pushing them really hard.
Yeah,
that was great.
There was some serious 80s action fantasy going on in the arcade.
No, I mean like we burned through money super fast. It was 100% worth it.
Yeah, every once in a while you're like, okay, I got $15.
Yep,
I'm gonna just set it on fire for this story.
Yeah. No, I would definitely say that I got more playing the game for 5 minutes that way than 10 minutes the right way.
Yeah, agreed. So we got a shill.
Yeah, do it.
So we not only did I play this game on stream, but we played this game on stream. So if you ever want proof that we actually play these games, you can check it out on Twitch. We are both on the Twitters. You can find all this crap in the show notes. There's a feedback form on the website. So if you want to do something like recommend a game, like say, no, really go out of your way to find time splitters, you could do that by requesting it. If you want to go the extra mile, you can do something nice like leaving us a rating and review, helps other people find the show, tell a friend, make them, actually sit them down, put the headphones in their ears, force them.
Yes.
And if you really want to go crazy, then you can actually give us money. And if you are a patron, all levels of our patrons get the after show, which is some bonus content that comes out almost every episode. We're not batting 1,000, but we're batting like 900.
Yeah. We're pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah. So, more show, and that's for all levels. And then if you back at high enough levels, you can get your name shouted out. And so we want to thank our 8-bit classics, Yarno,
Wielder of the Knife,
John,
Stabber with the Kunai,
and Kevin,
Basher with the Pipe,
and our 16-bit heroes, Jacob,
the Katana Slicer,
David,
Thrower of Arcade Cabinets,
and Michael,
Max.
Awesome.
Yeah. Pretty happy with that one.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the visuals. Yeah.
I really liked the visuals in this game. Like, visuals for the sake of visuals, it was very lovingly crafted. It looks, it's all kind of 16-bit sprites. Max, who was the one I played the most, literally looks like a 16-bit Hulk, very lovingly rendered.
Just the wrong color.
Just the wrong color. But one of the things I was thinking about is that this game is it's pixel art, and it has a 90s like punk rock aesthetic, which is different than the 90s grunge aesthetic that we've been seeing so far. When we said like it looks like a 90s game, like it does, but this doesn't look like Rocko's Modern Life. This looks more like the what 90s kind of like grunge culture.
It feels to me almost like aging hippies, but for 80s stuff.
Yeah.
Big hair, big men, busty women in short skirts. Like it's it's that, but you can tell it's not from 1984, right? It's not from 1988. It's like, oh, we've actually left the 80s, and this is like the holdover stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it is closer to the late 80s. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Fifth Element, you know?
Yeah, I could feel that. Which has, even though it's in the future, it has that kind of like dirty 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, with like the Mohawks and, you know, the not too distant future, and the kind of theming of corrupt corporations, because the Mr. X, they don't, I mean, he's like a gang leader.
Yeah, he's a gangster.
Yeah, he is, but I mean, they don't really establish whether or not he's also the head, like a Lex Luthor situation, you know, where...
Yeah. It's the difference between grunge and cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Like, these are believable punks. They don't have shotguns inside their false arms.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have connections to the, you know, fledgling internet, right? It's all possible-ish.
Yeah.
But it's very dirty, grungy, punky.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you hit it with, it's punk. Yeah. You know, it's not like grunge, you know, but yeah, so it hit me where I was like, yeah, this is like late 80s, early 90s, but not what you think of when you think of like Earthworm Jim or any of those games. This is kind of its own thing, but I think that it holds very well to that aesthetic. You know, it doesn't break from it.
It does, and I think part of what makes it feel like it's coming a little bit later is that they've started to gently move away from some of the tropes of the 80s. The men are big and beefy, but Max is the exception, right? Mm-hmm. Not every guy looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger from Conan the Barbarian, right? Not every woman is they're sexualized. They're not hyper sexualized. Like, it's not way over the top. It's just over the top,
right?
So it's starting to not, I guess, tone it down maybe is the right kind of term, but there's also like a little more diversity. Like, not everyone is just a straight white guy or straight white woman. Like, there's one of the players is, I want to say he's probably Latino because of the luchador sort of aesthetic. Skate is black. There's villains that are different ethnicities. So like, you see that was less true in the 80s, right? That was more like, we saw more diversity kind of creeping in the 90s. So it's the...
Well, so have you ever heard the phrase growing the beard?
No.
Oh, so, and for obviously for our listeners as well. So you've heard of jumping the shark, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a reference to in Happy Days when the fawn. Yeah. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the fawns jump the shark, right?
Yeah.
So the opposite of that is called growing the beard, which is a reference to
Riker.
Yes.
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 That's amazing.
Right?
That's so good.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say though that this is, you know, kind of video games growing the beard, but I'd say it's like they're growing the stubble, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like they're starting to get to the point where they said, what if not every woman was in a micro bikini? What if not every man looked like the Hulk? You know, what if some of these people looked kind of like normal people? What if that? You know? And so they still have some incredible over the top stereotypes, but there's less of them, and not every person is one of them. You know?
Trending in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not it's not there, but it's going in the right direction. Yeah, agreed.
And the punk aesthetic helps remind you that this is actually a product of its time, because a lot of movies, TV shows, video games, stuff, like, they will make something that looks just like this today and then be like, oh, but it's like an 80s throwback. And it's like, no, you don't get to just say that so it's okay to put that woman in a chainmail bikini. Like,
right.
In the 80s, it wasn't even okay. So you definitely can't pretend now, right? But because this is very, you know, Mohawks and Thunderdome and everything, like, it helps remind you, like, oh, this is actually a product of its time, with all of the bad things that come along with that. It's
kind of like a student that, you know, is getting C's, and you're like, man, why are you getting C's? It's like, well, they were failing the course, you know? So it's like, well, all right, that's good. But, you know, if all of a sudden, you know, you have an A student that suddenly is like, oh, I'm flunking tests on purpose, you know, like, isn't that, it's like, no, you were passing the test and then you deliberately started failing the test. Like, that's different.
Yeah, so less cool than you think. I want to specifically shout out two things that just leapt off the screen at me. One is I accidentally paused during Max's like rushing super move where he does the like shoulder bash, I guess, and then like a little tumble at the end. that may be my favorite animation in the entire game, because not only is that move really useful,
Yeah.
but it's got this awesome blur, like smearing effect on it. So it looks like he's going 1,000 miles an hour, especially because he's so big. So it's
Yes.
just like he's, approaching light speed. So everything starts to blur. He does the cool little tumble at the end, and it's so well drawn. It feels so heavy and powerful, which it is. Like, it's a big, heavy, powerful move. Especially when you realize you could like chain link multiple hits.
Yeah, that
with
was
it.
weird.
Yeah, but it's like it feels just the way it looks. Like when Blaze, she has like a little back, what you call it, like a somersault kick?
Yeah.
Just like a backflip kind of kick thing. And her foot, because it's further away from her body, like there's a little smearing effect on there. And it feels like super light, and she just like whoosh and does a little flip, and it's like super cool. And I love that they lean into those cartoony, because I mean, if you pause at the wrong time, some of them is just like, what? Right? Why is their foot so giant? Right? And it's a little silly, but it's meant to be seen in motion, and so it conveys this great sense of like momentum. And because it is moving constantly, right? There's just a million enemies on screen, just crap flying everywhere all the time. Like, you just don't really get to ever stare at one thing and say like, oh, I'm going to critique every pixel in this. Those kind of smears and stuff help direct your attention around, because like motion is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see, okay, I did what I wanted to do, or this guy's doing something, this enemy is coming at me super fast. And I love those little like cartoony smears. And I know it's not uncommon in video games for them to do that, but whenever they don't, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. Like, you have the art, like the pixels smear like ink in a Looney Tunes cartoon. Like, do it, smear it.
You look awesome. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but because sometimes we do this in visuals, the hitbox, I feel was, very fair in the sense that it was rare that I, was in the right plane of something, threw a hit, and I was like, oh no, I totally hit that. You pointed out the fact that I was generally playing as Max, who had the lowest possible speed, which
He did.
Which, to your point, I think also does make the hits feel heavier because he's moving slower. So that just, it's like, oh, he's so big. But there were times when definitely I started to throw a punch and another enemy threw a punch, and they were just faster, so they just hit me first. But that didn't feel unfair. But one of the interesting things is that not only are there hitboxes on your fists, which you would anticipate, but there's also hitboxes on other parts of the attack, which feels awesome. For Max, it's his elbow. I think for Blaze, it was her kind of knee, as well as heel. But yeah, no, I mean, like, so literally at one point, and it makes sense, like Max wound up to punch a dude in front of him in the face, and somebody was walking up behind me, so I elbowed that dude in the face and then punched the other person. So I think that the cool thing about that is that because there are multiple places that will register a hit on you, they then animated the characters such that at least at one point, generally when you're attacking, you will throw a hit to somebody that's behind you, which is awesome mechanically, because then it makes it less likely, not impossible, but less likely for you to just get ganged up on and then beaten to death, like in, I don't know, Golden Axe, right?
For example.
But I mean, remember in Golden Axe, like there was plenty of times where just a person was on each side of you. You would be attacking the person in front of you, and then a person would walk up behind you, and then they would both beat you to death, Yeah. But because of the way that they animated all of the attacks and the fact that your punch is not the only thing that hurts people, makes it so that way you do have some 360 range. Plus, and your ultimate attack generally specifically clears everyone around you.
Yeah, it's a space maker.
Yeah, so they kind of went out of their way with the way the attacks were animated and the way the hitbox play into that to make sure that you never really felt that you lost half of your health or an entire life just because you got set in a bad situation.
Well, and they even take that mechanic and sort of tune it to the individual character's sort of fighting style, right? Because when Max punches, like his starting, like if you're just standing there punching the air, so he's not doing a combo, it's like a hammering chop,
yes,
right? So it's like Thor like banging his fist on the table, demanding another beer.
To me, it's kind of like the thing where in TV shows and stuff, where like they hit them on the head and it shows them waist deep in the soil, you know?
Yes, it's exactly that hit.
Bonk.
And he's large enough to for that to be a possibility.
Yeah.
Right. Blaze does a lot. She punches, but she does a lot of kicking. Axel is more like your generic kind of brawler boxer. You know, he's kicking, but he's mostly throwing heavy punches. So when someone is behind you as Axel, you can kind of back fist them. And it's the same. It's mechanically, it's the same thing. It's so that people can't gang up on you, but they animate it in a way that makes sense for his build and his reach and his fighting style. Ditto for Blaze, ditto for Skate, right? So everyone can escape the, oh God, I'm being pinned down situation. And I think Max might be the only one who just sort of does it because of his size,
right,
which is cool and appropriate, right? It's you don't have to specifically say, I'm going to hit the guy behind me. Just you moving as Max causes problems for anyone who's too close to you, which it feels like, without going way too far into mechanics, it feels like the visuals of those animations help to support oh, your playstyle may be better suited to this character or that character or the other. And we're going to reinforce that this is happening differently by animating it all very, very differently.
And I also think, to kind of your point as well, not only do each of the pro tags have a different fighting style, but there are a lot of different enemies in this, and there is some palette swapping. You know, there's weekend dominatrix, and then weekday
dominatrix,
and then holiday
yeah,
dominatrix, right? You know, 3 different palette swaps for that particular character. But there's also there are Muay Thai fighters, there are boxers, there are kung fu experts, and each of them
robots.
There are robots, which to your point, all of the bosses eventually become just people that you meet and fight, and literally you fight 2 robots, and then the next stage, the very first enemy you fight as a random enemy is a robot. It's oh, come on.
It's like he just went and put on a fake mustache. He was like, no, I am new enemy robot.
So I like that as well, because again, it kind of helps the game from getting too stale, because you're not just fighting hundreds of foot soldiers, this person, fights like a Muay Thai boxer. And I think that there could be some in this, and I apologize if this is blind of me, but there could be some, tangential learning there, right? Because if all of a sudden you're like, what's that guy, and
because of the clothes,
right?
The
posture, the way that they're holding themselves. And it's oh, well, that person is, a kung fu expert. What's kung fu? What's Muay Thai? What's, flamethrower baseball dude style,
That one seems like it's hard on the heart, because you have to be really big.
Yeah. But I mean, you got to commit to it's like sumo, you know, you just got to commit. But yeah, so I enjoyed those variations, not only visually, but the fact that they then pinned the way they move and fight is different.
Well, and I think in the early days of Nostalgia Goggles, we both justifiably were pretty hard on palette swapping.
Mm-hmm.
And as time has gone on, I think my understanding of the utility of palette swapping has started to kind of refine a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Brawlers may be the place where palette swapping is the most meaningful, because I need to know this guy is the stupid jetpack guy, and he's going to move and attack exactly the same way every time.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what his colors are, right? Doesn't matter which dominatrix, doesn't matter which fire-breathing baseball fan do baseball. It doesn't matter which colors they are. I just know they're going to move and behave in this certain way. And when there is so much crap on the screen, especially, so we played through the whole game on easy.
Mm-hmm.
We finished it as a couple,
like a boss.
That's right. And then we played through as much as we could on hard, and I think we got
very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
We got halfway ish.
I mean, I think I got halfway. I think you got 60%.
Yeah, not very, very far, but far enough that even at that halfway mark, it's the screen just flooded with it.
Oh yeah,
just stuff everywhere. So many dudes.
Which, to be fair, one of the things that the observations we kind of made towards the end was, it's okay, so your objective is to save this dude, right? And we were like, okay, so 10 enemies per screen, 10 screens per stage, 8 stages. We killed probably between 800 and 1,000 people to save this one guy, you know?
Yeah, on easy.
Yeah.
If you beat the game 2-player on very hard, thousands of corpses in your wake, but you would know all their attack patterns because of that useful palette swapping.
You would. At that point, you would literally be killing tons of people, not figuratively.
Yeah. I think palette swapping is lazy when it doesn't usefully serve time pressure mechanics like this. So generally speaking, don't just take your white fluffy clouds and make them green and call them bushes. Like I get it. It was the Nintendo. Mario was doing the best with what they had, right? But now-ish days, right? From like the 16-bit era on, palette swapping is mechanically meaningful, and I can respect that. Like it helps me very immediately identify, okay, this is what this character is going to vaguely behave like. But if it's just like we drew one enemy and we have them in 9 colors, it's like, no.
Well, I think that I agree with you. And I think to your point is that I think initially when we started out, we were like, palette swapping's bad with some exceptions. And now I'm more like palette swapping is good with some exceptions, you know? But one of the most notable exceptions, I think, is ways to, and this is tangential to this game because this game does not do that, but when palette swapping is used as ways to cheaply extend Skinner boxes, by which I mean, right, is if you're playing an RPG, right, and you're like, I'm level 1 and fighting a level 1 jelly. Well, now I'm level 50 and I'm fighting a level 50 jelly. Well, it can't just be green. That would feel the same. So I colored it blue and now purple and now red. And it's like, oh, well, now it's level 50. It, again, behaves the same way. Everything about it's the same, but they're tricking you into thinking that you're making progress when literally you're doing the exact same thing that you were doing at level 1. They've just tricked you into wasting a ton of your time. That, I think, is in like not humane gameplay. And so that's where I'm like, now I'm more like, oh, well, you know, like to your point, right, is when you're trying to process a ton of information, you're like, I can kind of ignore some of the colors. The colors help it feel a little bit more like it's a world because there is weekday dominatrix and weekend dominatrix. It's not like they're just a sea of all of these twins that all dress the same, because then that wouldn't feel like a street brawler. It'd feel like a weird clone factory, right?
Yeah, if there's a bunch of punks, they should all have mohawks maybe and knives, but they're not clones. Right. I'm not fighting the clone army.
Exactly. So that kind of helps the game. But then also, too, like you said, based off of their silhouette, you can immediately assess what actions need to be taken in order to make optimal decisions. But in an RPG, it's being used to keep you in a Skinner box, you know? So again, I think initially most of our experience with palette swapping was with RPGs that we noticed. And so we were like, palette swapping sucks. Now it's like, actually, we were just experiencing the bad palette swapping.
Yeah. The bosses are as varied, I think, as the environments. This game does a weird thing with environments where they change a lot. Like you might walk only the length of 2 or 3 screens before it kind of like fades to black and fades back in, and you're in, you know, the next room or the next space or something. Like you move a lot. And I don't know if I honestly don't know if that's like common to brawlers, because this isn't like my main genre, but it felt like, wow, you feel like you, the player, and you, the character, are progressing from point A to point B, which is like fighting your way through the city up to, you know, Mr. X's hideout, I guess, at the top of a building. Anyway, but like it felt varied. There's a lot of different spaces. You go through a theme park, which is obviously based on Disneyland in California, because the castle in the background is the castle in Disneyland in California, no question. There's like a baseball stadium where you do baseball. There's the terrifying, like, I guess it's supposed to be like a haunted house sort of thing with the alien head. There's the underground, like, which is all kind of like a, you know, looks like the danger room, right? Metal panels and lights all over the walls. There's the office buildings, crap it, like a million. You go on a pirate ship at one point, like
billion things.
Yeah, there's so many different like environments, and each environment has multiple little sections you go through, and the stage itself has like multiple, you know, areas before you get to the boss where you actually clear that stage. So it's just they didn't you could just walk down one grungy alley for 8 stages and probably nobody would have complained.
Right.
So this feels like the kind of art direction where they were like, yeah, but that'd be boring and suck. So let's not be boring and suck.
Not phone it in. There's one observation that you made, and I've got some throwaway notes that I think was amazingly salient that I want to make sure that we touch on, which is that as far as the core gameplay loop, right, is that you enter into an area, that area is then frozen, you then beat all of the bad guys in that area, you then move on to the next area, right? But there are some times when like you're on an elevator going down or up and sideways or whatever, that in no way changes the gameplay loop, but literally because the animation in the background shows you going down, it feels different, you know? So as opposed to moving to the right and now there are more bad guys, you basically stay still and now there are more bad guys, you know? So it doesn't really change the gameplay in any way, but it feels 110% different, and that's awesome. That was your observation I just stole.
Thank you. No, I think what's cool about that is it feels visually different. It also creates for me a sensation of these are like the scary claustrophobic levels because I'm trapped in the elevator, or we're going up on this like weird mechanical lift and I'm trapped on the weird mechanical lift and enemies are just falling from the sky, right? In the weird mist horror house thing, I don't know what the hell to call that, where there's like mist all over the ground. Some of the enemies seem to rise up from the ground, but really they're just like lying in wait, you know? So it's like there aren't enemies, and then there are enemies. Right. And every single screen in the entire game has that. And it's like, sometimes they come from down, sometimes they come from up. Most of the time they come from left and right, but just changing up those animations completely changes the feel. Yeah, the whole feeling of that room. Even though if you just blacked out the background entirely, every stage would play identically.
Yes.
And I love that. It's almost like an optical illusion. Like, oh, we can change the way the player feels about like, oh no, this is the claustrophobic stage where enemies just keep coming. It's like enemies always just keep coming. I mean, that's the game.
It's basically like the equivalent of restaurants that put like a chest height mirror, you know, along one of the walls. Like literally one point I'm like, this restaurant is huge. Oh no, it's really small, but it just feels bigger. It feels about twice as big, right? You know, it's that kind of stuff. I've got some throwaway notes unless there's something big you want to tackle.
The only other thing about the visuals that I wanted to dive in on, just because I called it out sort of a second ago, is the enemies start to get a little samey just because they're quantity of bodies they're throwing at you is so high that you start to see the same enemies a lot. The bosses are quite varied. They're all super unique and interesting. They fight differently than the regular enemies, and then they quickly become regular enemies, and that helps to thin out the endless sea of Donovans that you have for like the first couple levels. Like the length of the game is well suited to the quantity of visuals.
Yes.
Right around the time you would start to be like, it's just a million Donovans.
What the hell, Donovan?
Yeah. Right around the time you would start to be really annoyed by that, the game ends.
Yeah.
So there's the amount of palette swapping and the amount of variety in regular enemies and then bosses turn into regular enemies is like, it's a perfect little fit. Yep. And I thought like, wow, that must be tough to balance. Like, can we not keep drawing more art assets? This is very time consuming and expensive. Like, we need enough and no more than that.
Yes. So just a couple throwaway weapons.
No, throwaway weapons. That's it.
Yeah. So enemies have a big telegraph for big weapons, like when they're swinging the pipe and stuff, but you don't. And that's super awesome. And the thing that I think is kind of cool about that is that it's the antithesis of what happens a lot of times in games, which is when an enemy's using a cool weapon and it's like the most amazing power staff of ultimate creation, and then you get it and it's like a +1 staff and you're like, what the hell, game? You know, so it's the opposite of that. The weapons are more functional in your hands, which I thought was kind of cool. Baddies have different names, but not always, you know, so
I think they're color consistent.
Yeah.
So like blue pants is always Donovan, but like orange pants is Martin or whatever.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, hey, they've got different names. A lot of Donovans. Max. So Max, the enemies can. One of the things that can happen is you can get suplexed, and you can suplex. watching Max get suplexed by a 99-pound waif in jeans was hilarious.
It is funny.
Because I was like, man, that guy has glutes for days. He just picked up this 500-pound dude and just slung him over his shoulder like it was nothing. And we'll get into each other's body slams in mechanics. And then the one final one that I had, which is the enemy's hit plane is slightly larger than our hit plane. I'm fucking sure of it. I don't want to discuss that because I don't think I have any real legs to stand on. I can't prove it. It's what I feel, and my feelings are right and valid, and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
That's fair. I want to tack one thing on to not the last thing you said.
No, nothing more to say on that.
So the fact that the enemies move a little bit differently with their weapons, I think what may be happening is when they swing the weapon, their wind-up frame pauses longer.
Yes.
And I think that may also be happening just on regular punches. For the player characters, this is like the one place where they really obviously phoned in the visuals. There may be other places where they phoned them in. This is the only one that felt obvious, is you hold the weapons, like the sprite is just in front of the hand that's holding it. So for most weapons, because what do we decide? There's 4. There's the knife and the kunai, and then the pipe and the sword.
I mean, I think I had 6 here when we introduced our patrons, but
oh crap, what were the other 2?
Arcade cabinets and Max.
Oh, okay, yeah. fair, yeah.
But the canonized ones, yes, there are 4.
Well played. I never figured out how to pick up Max.
I think that you did, as Blaze, several times learn how to. You did throw Max around like a weapon a couple of times.
That's true.
Yeah. See, he's a weapon.
Fair. But so you hold the weapon in like whatever your idle posture is, and then you swing it with whatever your striking animation is, and probably 8 out of 10 times that's fine. And then the other 2, it looks so silly. But the nice like shorthand thing that the animators get out of that is they don't have to draw weapon holding animations or weapon swinging animations, probably for the heroes or the enemies. It's probably just put this sprite there and extend the hitbox, right? Which I'm fine with. Like for the amount of effort they put into other animations, like I get it. You can't not everything can be that lovingly crafted, but every once in a while it makes for some very silly looking, especially in Max's hands, because he's just such a brute.
I thought I was done with throwaway notes. One other one that you made me think of with the animations is this is in stage 1, and it just absolutely tickled me when I finally realized it, which is that there are enemies wielding pipes that come out of the sewer, and literally the sewer manhole cover just opens and they vault straight up, pipe over their head 20 feet directly out of the sewer.
Yeah, I mean, from ground level, they're easily 4+ feet in the air. Plus, they had to jump out of the sewer. So even if they were on the ladder, they're still jumping 6-7 feet.
Yeah, so lats for days, because I imagine that they're on the ladder and then they just...
Oh, and vault up.
And they just pull themselves up and then have the pipe over their head. So
unsheath the pipe.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, just kudos to these guys for, and then immediately beaten to death by Max and Blaze, so I want to know their story. Like how many squats did they do? What kind of juice did they drink?
I think, I imagined it as they're standing and they jump up and headbutt the manhole cover out. And the thing is, I'm not sure which one of those is more ridiculous. like vaulting yourself 7 feet in the air or jumping 15 feet in the air are both pretty absurd.
Yes. But anyways, I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And that is, honestly, that's maybe one of the silliest anime, because there's a couple of bosses that are super powered, right? They're crouching tiger, hidden dragon levels of flippies and jumpies and speed and stuff, but those are normal enemies, and that's just the way they enter the screen.
Yeah.
So that's probably the only thing that is just that was dumb.
How weird. That's not how physics works.
You silly sewer dwellers. Audio?
Yeah. Go for
it. Every song in this game is a banger.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting about this series is if you go on to the internet don't tell anybody I told you this. But if you go onto the internet and you find people talking about the soundtrack from this series, because we played the second one, there are now 4 of these, right? 3 on the Mega Drive, and then 1 on modern consoles that came out like a couple of years ago. There's some serious tribalism going around about which game had the best soundtrack. And I think that's kind of awesome.
Right.
Because nobody ever says, no, that game has a terrible soundtrack. This game has a good soundtrack. It's, I love the soundtrack to Streets of Rage 2. And it's like, well, my favorite is Streets of Rage 1. And then somebody else comes in and they're like, I really think that, like, you know, level 4 from Streets of Rage 3 is the best one in the whole series, right? It's just this like love fest.
Yeah.
Not tearing each other down, just trying to build their team up more. And it's like, that's fantastic for the music. The sound effects are so bog standard, it's shocking.
Yes.
But the music is just, every track is so good. And I actually, while I was looking up, because I have like reference visuals up while we record, I found out that they released the soundtrack to at least Streets of Rage 2, maybe to other installments in the series on vinyl.
Really?
Yeah, like a limited run.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah, that's good.
But that sums up, how do people feel about the soundtrack to this game? Well, they did a limited run of it on vinyl.
So there it is. Now, actually, I saw a great meme a while back where it said, it was just 2 people like arguing, and the person said, the best Zelda game is the one that came out when I was 12. And they said, no, the best Zelda game is the one that came out when I was 12, right? So I feel like that may be some of the consternation with like the Streets of Rage. I mean, it's not Rage, you know, but the Streets of Rage battle, where it's like, well, which one do you have the most nostalgia for? Because they're all amazing, right? All of the songs are awesome. So if there's, it then becomes a point of preference. And I think that there is, and this is a little philosophical, which I'm using to pad the fact that I don't really have too many audio notes. But I think that there is something tacitly different between, and we've had this argument with countless people of saying like, there are 2 things. I like thing A better than thing B. That's fine. That's an opinion, right? And you're allowed to have an opinion, right? But to say like thing A is good and thing B is bad, there are some things that you can objectively say about a thing to say like, for example, a movie. There are things that a movie can do storytelling wise that therefore makes it a well-told story. You can hate the story. You just hate anything about it, right? You just not like it, right? All that's fine. For example, when I was, I am now enjoying this thing, but for years, I just didn't like Hamilton. Just didn't like it. Yeah. You know, and people were like, but you like rap. Mm-hmm. And you love musicals. Yeah. And you like history. Yep. And you hate Hamilton. Mm-hmm. Don't know why. Don't get it. Like, and then people would argue with me saying like, well, but it has this. I'm like, it's good. I agree with you completely. It's great. I'm weird. Like, don't, you know, so it's nice to see people saying like, your thing is good and my thing is good. My thing's better. And it's like, yeah, but now it's fun, you know, as opposed to I'm trying to disenfranchise you.
Yeah. It's when it's all about, here's why I think my thing is the best.
Yeah.
Those always seem more wholesome as arguments.
Well, and also, too, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, too. Is here's why I think my thing is the best, not here's why I think your thing is the worst.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I don't have to win by everyone else failing. I'm trying to win on, like, this is the Olympics.
Yeah.
We're all great.
Yes.
But I just want to get the gold.
Yeah.
Not I'm an Olympic runner and you are a bunch of kindergartners. and so you will lose, not I will win.
Yeah.
And this is weird that I don't know if they lucked into the soundtrack being so good. I don't know how different the labor is for like music composition versus like the Foley sound effects kind of stuff. But these sound effects left like no impression on me.
Nah.
So the one thing I will say for them, and this always sounds like a dig and it's really not, is it's a brawler, so just like a shoot 'em up, in a beat 'em up, there are certain noises you hear infinity billion times.
Yep.
And none of those noises are offensive.
Yes.
None of the punching or getting hit noises, none of the weapon pokey stabby noises make kind of like a sort of noise. Like none of those.
Oh man, I would pay money for the the stabby knife to make that noise, especially the one kindergartner guy that just kind of runs at you. It hits you.
That would be incredible. That's a ROM hack worth doing. But yeah, there's nothing offensive about them, which is a win, right?
Yes.
It is a win because you hear the sounds so much, and not just like, oh, you hear them many times. It's you hear them constantly,
Yeah, perpetually.
The fact that you can even hear the music is kind of a miracle. So it's just the fact that they're inoffensive is more or less a win. The exception, and it's just unfortunate, a lot of games from this time have this problem, but the one that stands out in my mind is when a female enemy dies, when one of the, oh my God, are the dominatrix ladies, are they the only women enemies?
No, they're not. I'm so sure.
God, I really don't want that to be true.
No, because I remember when we made mention of the female death sound, it was not fighting them.
Okay.
We were in a different area.
Okay.
I can't think of who died.
Yeah, please don't have a single woman in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so however many there are, when they go down, their scream is like, if you're sitting in front of this game and somehow you didn't know, am I playing this on the Genesis or like you played it on the Switch, right? Mm-hmm. So you have like a Sega Classics, you played it on the Switch. And so you might be looking at your Switch in your hands and be like, was this originally on the Super Nintendo? And then you hear that grindy, screechy, glass shattering nails on a chalkboard, woman's screaming noise. And you're like, Genesis. Like that just so immediately nails it as this noise was generated by the sound chip in a Sega Genesis.
Yes, no, agreed completely. The one thing though that I will say even positively about that, which is because this game inherently draws comparisons to Golden Axe, which is just an atrocious game, awful. I mean, like I actually have reverse nostalgia goggles for it because I loved it. And it was like the first bad game, deeply bad game that we reviewed.
Yes.
Because we did Super Mario World, then Sonic, then that game. And I was like, well, great to have a floor. So all that being said is I think it's the exact same noise that the women made when they died in Golden Axe. Genesis would make sense. But it was not as offensive because it comparatively has a much lower volume compared to everything else. So in Golden Axe, if a sound effects made a noise at like a level 5 and the music was at a 5, then the screech was at a 5, right? For this one, if everything's at a 5, their screech is at like a 3 or a 2. So it's still the exact same noise, but because it's not as loud, it doesn't jolt your soul out of your eyes every time you hear it.
And because it is mostly men punching out other men, you do hear it less, right? Which is helpful. And I think,
oh no, there may only be women because I think it was Blaze. I think it was Blaze. I think you died.
Yeah.
I
think you might
Darn
be right. I think and there's only, I think 3 color combinations of the dominatrix lady.
And it's a bummer that the only woman in there is the sexualized one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Blaze is, in a pantsuit.
No, but still that the only female enemy is highly sexualized. Well, bummer.
Anyway, let's not relitigate but I think it's, you're right. They do tone it down a little bit, which helps because that at least shows awareness because imagine if it was like tires screeching before like a car crash. Like, well, the Sega Genesis can only produce, the Master System can only, or Mega Drive, the Master System was the previous one.
Get it together.
The Mega Drive, the Genesis can only produce, so many sounds and so many ranges. So like tires screeching may sound like a woman screaming, right? But someone had the awareness to be like, but it doesn't have to be at volume 11, right? Like we can tone it down a little and then it's still screechy, but it's like less, right?
That's all I've got for audio.
Yeah, I really, I've said this so many times recently, but it consistently bums me out when I'm like, passable work, audio engineers.
Yep.
Great job, composers.
Yeah.
Because then you just feel like these are probably not the same people, right? Like the character designers and the animators are probably not the same people. So if you said the animations are great, but the character designs suck, like you're not saying I like some of your work, but I dislike some of your work. Like, we're probably sliding an entire team at the company.
I will say one other thing for audio in service of mechanics, which is that whenever you hit somebody, it makes the thwack you hit them noise, which means that, and there's a visual cue as well. But if you are hitting somebody who is not on screen, that helps.
True.
So it's nice that even if they're off screen, it will still A, register a hit, B, sound effects let you know there's a hit, and C, put their health bar up on the screen to let you know, yes, you are making contact with the person, or more often, no, you're not. You are swinging perpetually at nothing.
Yeah. Whiff, 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 whiff. I'm actually going to use that thing you just reminded me of as our segue into controls and mechanics.
Nice.
Because you just reminded me that when we were playing co-opular, I noticed that the health bar of your opponent doesn't just show up on screen, which is nice. It shows up underneath your health bar, meaning not underneath my health bar. So I know, like, if we're both fighting Donovan, like, I know your Donovan is almost dead and my Donovan still has half health, right? And I thought that was kind of neat. But the thing that actually made me notice it is a few times, not a bunch of times, but a few times we successfully pinned like a boss, because the boss characters are almost always larger.
Yes.
In fact, I think they're exclusively larger. I don't think any of the bosses are the size of like the normal street punks.
Oh, yeah. No, not the size of normal street punks. Max is larger than many of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But so the bosses are all giant, which means they're large enough that we can hit them without being at risk of hitting each other. And then you see the health bar for that enemy under both of our health bars, because we are fighting the same enemy at the exact same moment. And I was just like, it's super subtle, and it's not like I'm staring at it and like counting down the seconds until the enemy's defeated sometimes. But I just thought, I was like, oh, it's a thoughtful touch. And with so much going on screen, with a bajillion enemies, with you and I both running around, with crap, people flying in, dropping in, shooting out of manhole covers and popping up out of the mist and stuff, like anything to help you, the player, feel like you have your bearings is worth having, because it just helps you feel like you have your bearings. Even if it doesn't actually change the way you behave at all, it might just make you feel like I know what's going on.
Yes. No, agreed. And actually, you hit on one of the things that I want to talk about, because honestly, initially I would have said this is annoying as hell and I hate it. But man, it made playing the game so much fun. Friendly fire is super on in this game.
Super on.
Yeah. And we found that out in a hilarious way, which was that Max went up to Blaze and lovingly hugged her from behind, and we were like, what's going on? I was like, oh man, maybe there's like a super move we're gonna do together, and I suplexed you into the ground. We're like, oh my god.
Yeah, if you stop on the grab like frame of animation and it's the two player characters, because I had the exact same thought.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, are there twin moves? But no.
Nope, just pounding people into the ground. But one of the things so initially, right when we realized that, we were like, oh God, and then immediately kind of split up. And a part of me was worried that I'm like, well, now we're just going to be playing two different games, you know? I'm like, that's not going to be as much fun. But the game really does kind of force you perpetually to be near one another and kind of cognizant of that. And man, there was definitely some generic hilarity that ensued from, like I remember at one point it was really awesome where the boss had like a sliver of health left and they were wailing on you. So I like bull rushed through you, hit you, but then also hit the bad guy. And you're like, yes, worth it,
100% worth it.
Yeah. So stuff like that, again, just really made the gameplay more enjoyable, and it made it feel more real. Because otherwise it would have just felt very gamey to, be swinging wild kind of all over the place. It's like, no, if you are fighting with a friend against a whole bunch of people, you kind of need to know where you're both at, because if you can, in real life, friendly fire is on,
Well, and I said the way I immediately imagined it once we were like, oh, friendly fire is a thing, is it kind of has to be.
Yeah.
Because otherwise what we would do is go to the, scroll the screen to where baddies started spawning, and then stand back to back on top, like layer our sprites on top of each other,
yep.
and then just punch in opposite directions. So people are coming toward us and just instantly dropping, right?
Yeah.
And you can't do that because like Max has his big wind back and Blaze has her big circle kick. So like you can't be that close to each other. And it does, even on very hard. I don't remember having too many moments where I was like, oh, this crappy friendly fire mechanic just cost us the win, right? It was either harmless but realistic and felt like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool that this is in here. Or it was hilarious, like on very easy, where shenanigans would ensue occasionally. And then it's like, yeah, no, I mean, neutral to hilarious, I'm pretty much always going to vote for that.
Oh, yeah. Like at one point you picked up the pipe. Like we both went to pick up the pipe at the same time. You picked it up, so then I punched you in the face and took the pipe. And I was like, and so my reaction wasn't to be contrite or apologetic. I said, my pipe. So yeah, I mean, like stuff like that, it's great. One of the things we kind of touched on before, the different animations, but and it's just kind of a throwaway, I just want to make sure I toss it in there, is the different players are remarkably different. Like not only are their animations different, but I mean, you know, and you kind of said it's a 3-star system, right? So 1 star is the lowest stat a person can have, and 3 stars is the highest. And it matters. But the cool thing about that is that it then, again, reinforces the fact that the community is one of the core aesthetics of this game, because it really behooves you to not play as 2 Maxes. You want to have a Max in the Blaze, or a Max in an Axel, or a Max in a Skater.
Skate?
Yeah. His last name is Oh. Yeah, of being formal.
Yeah. Table for Skate?
Yeah. Notice how Max was always, like, you always need a Max and a.
Yeah.
But I mean, that being said, is that, you know, when I was playing single player through, there were some bosses in particular where I was like, this guy is intolerable. But then most of the time I'd say, Lions, take care of this guy because you're faster, you know? So it really behooves you to be playing with a friend and to be playing as 2 separate characters.
Well, and I've started to notice that the skill of coordination is something that breaks down really quick in a game that isn't well designed for coordination. So, for example, and I'm really not trying to start a fight here, but you like the new Super Mario Brothers franchise.
You. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't listening. What were you saying?
You like the new Super Mario Brothers franchise, and I don't care for it. A big part of the reason I don't care for it is because I always felt like there was nonsense happening that communication was not able to fix. Like no amount of myself and the other player are talking about what we're going to do, when we're going to do it. We're trying to stay far apart. There were still times where it's like, thank you for knocking me into that pit. Thank you for throwing me into that pit. Thank you for jumping off of me, so I fell into that pit. Like, and in both directions, right? It's not like, oh, I must suck because this is always happening to me. Like, I was also unintentionally murdering player 2.
Unintentionally.
But I mean, but this is the thing is I just like, it's fine that you like that game and I don't, but that to me is its Achilles heel. It is a game that is supposedly designed for friends that is not fun with friends as far as I'm concerned.
Like Mario Party.
Supposedly designed for friends and is just random bullshit. So you have way too much of that in some games, and then you have a game like Streets of Rage or Street Fighter or some of the Mortal Kombats where it really feels like they thought about it. They thought, this game is obviously meant for 2 friends at the arcade cabinet, for 2 friends sitting on the bedroom floor, 6 inches away from the television. Like, that's how this is meant to be done. That we have to nail that. Like, I would almost accept saying like, oh, this game or brawlers in general aren't very fun single player. And maybe you think they are, maybe you don't. Like, for me, it's only about 2-player. Mm-hmm. Like, the single player mode in this game is like kind of the way people talk about the single player in
versus games.
Well, I was thinking in like Halo, right? Or like Counter-Strike. Like, yeah, they have campaigns. It's not what anybody goes there for.
Right.
I can't imagine someone saying, I love playing brawlers single player and also hate playing them 2-player. Like, I mean, I'm sure those people exist. And I mean, whatever, butt for every seat. But like, so weird to somehow take something that was designed, it's a seesaw, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, I like to just sit on the seesaw and then just jump as high as I can and then smash into the ground ass first. And I'm like, really? I mean, okay, but like that, would two people? No, okay,
no,
okay. I'm just gonna go play Streets of Rage, I guess.
Yeah, whatever works for you. The game again. Community is definitely a core aesthetic for this game. So there are 4 difficulty levels.
Very easy.
I think it's just easy.
Is it?
Slap
no. Max bet. So it's easy and then very hard.
Yeah.
Is that it? So easy, normal, hard, very hard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
You may be correct. I did somehow only the extremes. So
right, no, because I believe that it's theoretically kind of supposed to be like, nightmare mode in Doom. Where it's like there's easy, medium, and hard, and then very hard, where it's like, okay, you did it on hard, on very hard. It's like you probably most people won't be able to beat this.
Yeah, an ocean of fists are coming at you.
Yeah, no, definitely not a One Punch Man situation. More like a thousand, more like an E Honda, 1,000-hand slap. So that being said, is that the difficulty does scale, but not as much as we thought it was going to. I mean, easy, we were able to pretty much walk through it, but again, on the most extreme difficulty one, even though there was a million people around, we made it pretty far, and neither of us were, I would say, really bringing our A game, like
no,
we weren't, it was late. We were tired and punchy, like it wasn't like, we were sitting there, we were leaning back on the couch, not sitting forward on the couch,
Yeah. Yeah. We were shoulders away from the TV, not shoulders into the TV.
Yeah.
But I think there is a little bit more baddies when there's 2 people.
Yes.
And I think how hard you hit / how much health they have, that changes as the difficulties go up.
Definitely their health goes up, because I remember why, like yield sign, whatever, one of the throwaway bad guys, his health bar went from a little bit larger than Donovan's to almost our health bars. I was like, oh my.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you also hit harder or hit less hard, and they have more health, right? So it's whatever the difficulty curve is, but it doesn't feel insurmountable.
Right.
Like when you finish the game on whatever the lowest difficulty setting is, you could then very reasonably say, I'm going to move up to the next difficulty setting. Or, I've been, maining Axel and now I want to main Max. So like, I'm going to go down a difficulty setting because I have to play with a character who has like a different kind of moveset and behaves a little differently. And I appreciate that, because I'm usually a normal and down player. Like I just started Uncharted 4. I know it's not brand new, but like it's new to me. So there's like Explorer, which is like you have to jump off a cliff to die mode. And the story is what makes that game. So like a lot of people, that's what they want.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want death-defying shootouts. They want the story. And that's a mode catered to that. But then there's also the hardest difficulty, which I believe is literally called crushing. So, some people are like, no, every bullet should kill me. I want to earn every victory. And it's like that's also fine. I'm not that person. So the fact that to me, all of the like easy doesn't feel like such a cakewalk that it's not any fun, and very hard or whatever it is doesn't feel so difficult that it's like, how could anyone ever do this? Like that's, for me personally, me, the individual player, saying all of the difficulty modes in this are interesting and possibly worth playing, especially for a game that's not terribly long. And so part of the replay value is going up in difficulty, playing with characters that you don't like the way they handle as much, right? Like doing things that make the experience harder, and that's still feeling like it's worth doing. So that's nice.
Do you want to kind of touch on the controls and button combinations a little bit?
Yeah, I hate them. So what I think is weird about the controls, okay, I don't know, maybe you grew up in like the lap of luxury. Maybe all of your video game consoles had 2 controllers, even if it didn't ship with 2 controllers. But to me, the kids who had the specialty controllers, those were the ones who had just like, whoa, so much money.
I had one specialty controller actually for the Genesis, and I remember it distinctly because it had 3 little like kind of radio buttons on, like there was an on off button on.
It was like a turbo controller.
Yeah, so you could turn it on to on if you press the button, it's hitting the button as fast as possible, and then also just on all the way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Repeat, hold, repeat, and then auto fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
That was my controller.
My brother technically had the Super Nintendo version of that, and it was one of those things where like I'm sure he didn't lord this over me like a meth dealer, but I remember, like, I feel like I have these memories of going to him and being like, "Please, sir, can I play with the cool controller?" Right? But that was our one weird novelty controller. I had friends and some of my cousins who had like the track and field pad for the NES. Right, people who had like the NES Zapper, and then on the Super Nintendo and the Master System, the Mega Drive, there was fight sticks. I think the original Nintendo also had a fight stick, but oh my god, who cares? So on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, where good fighting games were, you had fight sticks, which is like a tiny arcade desk top thing, right, with a joystick and then big buttons that you press with your fingers, not with your thumb. This game has, because it was designed for the original Genesis, and the original Genesis shipped with a 3-button controller, the 6-button controller came later, and most games just doubled up what all the buttons did, which was so dumb. They decided, okay, we need you to be able to do your special with 1-button press, we need you to be able to attack with 1-button press, and we need you to be able to jump with a single button press. And they couldn't map jump to up because you have to be able to go in and out of the foreground, so that the D-pad is strictly for movement. So they decided, we will map one thing to A and B, and then we will map this other thing to B and C. And man, with my adult-sized thumbs, I had trouble making those movements fire. The only time, and I know it's not the controller, and I know it's not the game, because if I turned my hand sideways and did it with my index finger and middle finger, I could make it work 100% of the time. So it was like, did I even know about this as a kid? It's in the manual, but like, was I able to do this as a kid? Did I just mash my palm against the controller? Like it's bad. I don't like it. It's not a good choice unless you were playing with a fight stick. Then it probably felt great. So if you were playing this at home with a fight stick or on an arcade cabinet, then it probably felt great. But to do it with a Genesis controller, no good. Not at all.
0 stars on Yelp. Would not recommend. Even Max's mighty hands could not touch that. I assume. So Blaze is Blaze and Axel, but Max, his last name has to be Power, right?
I just assumed his entire name is Max.
Like Cher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Axel Smith and Blaze Johnson and Max.
So no, I agree and co-sign on all that. The one other thing, and these are kind of throwaway notes, but one, so there's a difficulty setting. There's also dual mode, so.
Oh yeah, like Street Fighter mode, hidden inside the menu, or not hidden, but there.
Yeah, and so like that's. I kind of like that because inevitably there would be times where you would probably say, I just want to slug it out with you, And so instead of clearing a level full of bad guys and then slugging it out, you can just slug it out, if that's what you want to do. So it cost them none's money to make that mode. So
and they don't market it this way, but like newer fighting games often have the put me in a room where the background is a light gray grid so that I can see exactly how far my punch reaches and exactly how high I can jump because I'm going to go into tournament play and there's $10,000 on the line. This is not anywhere near that sophisticated, but it does serve the same purpose. You could go into dual mode just to see how slowly Max really moves and how far Skate really can jump when he does his little dive thing. And you could use it as like safe practice space because the main game is timed. So even after the enemies are defeated, you can't just stand there like an idiot. You got to move on.
Yes, agreed on all fronts. Your power move uses health. I think that's important because otherwise, why would you ever use anything but your power move? It's not slow enough to not use it, because a lot of times it's like, oh, well, yeah, you could use your power move all the time, but you move slow as dirt. It's like, no, it moves pretty fast and is very powerful, So I kind of like that trade-off because the idea then is you only really use it in situations where you are likely to lose more health by not using it, So definitely when we were, especially with bosses, right? Because you're going to get all your health back afterwards anyways, sometimes.
I don't think that's true on the harder difficulties.
Yeah, no, because I remember definitely making that gamble before the baseball thing where I was like, I'll get my health back. And then, nope. But that being said is that, where you'd be fighting a boss and then you just slam into them. Felt good. There's delicious garbage food, which is kind of a trope of these games.
There's delicious food inside things that clearly don't have enough volume to hold the chicken.
Yeah.
Like street barricades, like on sawhorses with a single 2x4 across them.
I really want to know how some of the arcade cabinets smelled having roasted chicken in them for an indeterminate amount of time.
Yeah, they're always fresh roasted chickens too.
Yeah, it's not.
Oh,
which means somebody's replacing the chicken.
No, this is the dumbest headcanon, but just follow me on this. You can occasionally transmute things into roasted chicken. So it's not that the roasted chicken is inside. It's that like occasionally, and I know it's always the same places in every level, which is why this wouldn't work, but occasionally you can transmute this bar chair into a roasted chicken or an apple or bars of gold, right?
Yeah.
So it's not inside the arcade cabinet. You smash the arcade cabinet and you reconstitute its atoms into a roasted chicken. Well, I feel like such a goddamn moron even just saying that out loud.
Well, yeah, either that or there's frozen chicken, right? And you hit it so hard that it cooks the chicken,
Ooh. Oh, you know what it could be? It's that plus in Back to the Future 2, the dehydrated pizza. It's like the size of like a hockey puck, but then when it gets reconstituted, it's like an extra large pizza.
Yeah.
That's how they fit it in there.
Yeah.
So it's a tiny dehydrated, like flash frozen chicken, and the might of Max's fist reconstitutes it into a full-sized fresh roasted chicken.
Because you punch it so hard that it cooks it, and you're punching so hard that you're compressing the water vapor in the air to create water in order to
hydrate it. Yes.
And hydrate it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No. Now I'm in. It took some workshopping, but we got there. And then the one final thing, and this is a slightly more than a throwaway note, but is that you don't share continues. And initially we were like, yay, you don't share continues. But I thought about that and I've changed my tune, which is that you don't share continues. And the reason why we were happy was because that meant that we both had 2 continues. Or you just pool continues, right? In the sense of the reason why I don't think that it's the call here is because when we were playing on Very Hard, you were playing remarkably better than I was, which means that literally I died and you had only used 1 continue. So you had like effectively 8 lives left, So I was like, well, I guess I'll go make a drink, So so I don't think that that's in a game that is made for co-op. I always like it better when they do a thing where bringing player 1 back is damaging to player 2, a lot of times, like, I'll hit start and then I come back with half my life left, but I take up half of your remaining life. Also, too, one of my favorite ones is like in Enter the Gungeon, where if player 2 dies or player 1 dies, the chest that would have a gun in it now has player 2, which is way worse, because I'd be playing that with Teddy and he'd be like, Dada, look, I'm back. I'm like, yay, you're back, son. I could have used that weapon though.
I wish you were a gun.
Exactly, because I'd be like, you're gonna die again in 2 minutes. I could have used that gun for way longer than that.
So what you may be ferreting out is, so we did not check because that's not a thing we do here. Nope. I don't know if this series started in the arcade, if it was in parallel released in the arcade, or if this just plays like an arcade game but was never actually in the arcade. But regardless of which one of those things is true, this continue thing smacks of arcade.
Yes.
Because it's quarters.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't have continues pooled because we don't have quarters pooled, right? It's
right.
I need you, the person literally standing next to me, to put more literal money into the literal machine. And even if they didn't actually pull this game from the arcade, which I honestly don't think that they did, but even if they did, that is a design decision that is reminiscent of I'm pulling this from the arcade, right?
Right.
I think almost anything else would be better on a home console, because it's like, you know, we pool continues, or we have infinite continues, because oh my god, who cares? I already paid for the game. Also, this is another thing that's like reminiscent of, it came from the arcade design thinking, is you can dial up and down how many lives you have, but not how many continues you have, because how many quarters do you have? That's how many continues you have, right? So there's just, it's one of those things that, whether they literally ported it from the arcade or they just made a lot of arcadey decisions because it's a beat 'em up, it's just like, because it's one of the few things that interferes with it feeling like a more modern experience. And Streets of Rage 4, which came out in the last few years, pretty recently, I guarantee you handles continues differently, since it was released directly to PC and home consoles.
Yes. But yeah, that's kind of all I got. You got any other heavy hitters?
Nah, we can talk about how it heavy hitters. We sorry, we could talk about how it held up.
So, how to hold up?
For me, I'm going to give this game a begrudging nostalgia monocle. This game should be no nostalgia goggles required, but the only thing that pushes it into nostalgia monocle for me, literally the one and only thing, is sometimes, especially on the harder difficulties, you just get overrun and there's not a damn thing you can do about it, because they wanted your quarters, right? Or they learned from the design school of wanting your quarters. And that is, for me, instant experience ruiner. Just, there's nothing I could have done to escape that, right? There's no creative button combination. I don't have a way to clear, my surrounding area. The button combination to defend myself when I'm being pinned down isn't great, or whatever. The hitbox is slightly off, so I should have cleared all the enemies away, but instead I cleared all of them away except this one, and then he murdered me. Like, that's something that modern brawlers have struggled to fine tune, because it's really hard when you have that like weird, vanishing into the background pseudo z-axis. How do you decide where the hitbox starts and stops for the enemies, for the player, for special moves, for weapons? And it's hard. It's not that it isn't a hard problem, but the thing that pushes it from no nostalgia goggles to nostalgia monocle is you will care about that happening in single player. So if you can play this game exclusively with other human beings, no nostalgia goggles required. If you're going to play it in your Sega Genesis collection on your Switch by yourself, nostalgia monocle.
And I would agree with that. I would actually give this no nostalgia goggle required, simply because I believe that one of the core aesthetics to this game is community. So, it would be like saying, Halo's not that great. Well, I mean, how do you play it? Well, I mean, I played through the single player mode like 3 or 4 times. I don't really like it. And it's like, well, have you ever played it with friends? No. So I think that this game, most brawlers, but I mean, especially this one, it's just made to be played with a second player. I mean, when I was playing it by myself, literally, I was probably going to give it a nostalgia monocle or full nostalgia goggles, because I'm like, this is so repetitive and I don't care, But then when you and I were playing it, I had a blast, man.
So I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done before. I'm going to change it.
Ooh.
And here's why.
And you know what I really appreciate is you could just edit.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I'm going to be honest, because I think the thought process here is meaningful, which is radio edit. No, I think the thought process here is meaningful because we had the opposite problem when we played GoldenEye. GoldenEye is a game that was designed to be played single player that has a co-op mode, which is the only fun way to play GoldenEye. This game is a 2-player game that has a single player mode. So I don't think it's fair to penalize it for the single player experience when the designers knew full damn well, no, you are supposed to play this with your friend. That is the entire point of this game. So yes, I'm going to say no nostalgia goggles required if you play it correctly, which is with another person.
Right. Yeah. So basically the game's made to be played with 2 players. It has a 1-player mode. That's not the way to play it. It'd be just like with Overwatch, you can play against AI. You can play against AI all day long. But
single player in this is the practice mode for 2-player.
Yeah. So that way, when you play with 2-player, you don't have the person saying like, come on, Donovan, get your mess together. But yeah, no, I mean, I would definitely say that, you know, like the energy this game puts forward into being a good game is at max power. It's the game you know you want to touch, but you cannot touch.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.